All right, folks. Well, we were talking about Hyper-V, and we built some Hyper-V systems. Well, we built one anyway. We'll build more later. And we started to talk a little bit about virtual switches and virtual LANs and networks. And I realize I haven't even talked to you about what an IP address is. So let's get that out of the way. You're not going to understand networking without some IP address information. So we're going to open this up, and you can see that we've got an IP address consists of four subparts. There's two different types of IP addresses. There's IPv4 and IPv6. We're going to be talking about IPv4 because that's still where everybody is for the most part. And IPv6 is a dangerous thing. It's dangerous because people use it as a hacking tool because of functionality that we'll get into later. So, the command when you open up a command prompt to see your IP address is ipconfig, and then you see a bunch of information. In this case, this is our primary internet connection, Ethernet adapter number 4, and these are all IPv6 addresses. This is an IPv4 address. It even tells you IPv6, V6, 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 and V4. So, first off, let's get rid of IPv6. You should have IPv6 turned off in your network unless you're using it everywhere. If you're not using it everywhere, you need to turn it off. Like I said, it can be a security risk because IPv6 is overridden. Oh, sorry. IPv6 overrides IPv4 if there's a DHCP server. You don't know what a DHCP server is yet, so we'll get to that when we get to that. Let me go in and we will change. We'll do some control panel. And then we're going to go to network and internet. And then we're going to go to network connection center. And then we're going to click on our connection here. And we're going to go to properties. And then I'm going to turn off. I'm going to uncheck IPv6. And I'm going to hit OK. And then close. And close. And then when I refresh this and I type ipconfig again, you'll see that now I just have these things. So you've got three critical pieces of information here. You've got your IP address, you've got a subnet mask, and you've got a default gateway. So let's break these things down so that these are very, I hope, easy to understand. So you've got 192.168. Dot, in my case, 1.103. This is my address, and this is like a street address. So my house is, in this case, 103. So I'm number 103 on the street. And when people go to talk to me or send me mail, sometimes literally, they're going to want to know what that address is. And if you wanted to leave the street, that's where the default gateway is. The default gateway is for all traffic that is not on the street. For all traffic not on the street. That's it. Now, the subnet mask, 255.255.255.0, tells you how big the street is. Now, from a networking standpoint of building out networks and securing them, we're on a home network. We're in an isolated network. We're in a network that doesn't plan on having any internet connections. If you're managing a business environment, this is not a business environment. I run a business environment, and I can assure you that my business environment doesn't have a 192.168.1 address. You should never use. I'm gonna typo horribly. Spell check is my friend. Should never use a .0 or .1 subnet. We'll get into a lot of the reasons why, but effectively, you should not be using these at your businesses when you set up your network. We'll get into why all of those things and how to set those things up and getting down in the dirty of network configuration later. But keep in mind that you should never be using a 0 or a 1 in your subnet. for your business, because people are going to probably, at some point in time, VPN or connect to that infrastructure. And most home networks are .0 or .1 by default. That means you're going to have conflicts. You can learn how to fix those conflicts and circumvent those conflicts, but really, maybe you should just not worry about having those conflicts at all and set your networks up right the first time. So, back to the lesson on IP addresses. This tells us, because we have a range of 0 to 255, that there's effectively 255 addresses that are available here. Each one of these 255 is 8 ones. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's that, right? This is not going to be a lesson on subnetting. There are 5 million subnetting applications, subnetting tools, how to subnet. You can find 9,000 videos on subnetting, on all of these things. We're not going to get into that. I'm not going to cover subnetting because this is covered ad nauseum, and there's 900, probably 9,000 apps that will subnet for you that you can get installed on your phone. That we're not going to go over that. What we are going to go over is the generalities that you're going to need to run into. You're going to need to understand that this, even though this says that there could be 255 devices on it, the reality is that you have something called a DHCP scope. And DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. Effectively, this computer, when it boots up, it says, hey, I need an IP address, and there's a DHCP server. This is usually part of your router, and it recognizes that you're asking for an IP address. You're saying, hey, I need an IP address. I am a dynamic network card. I've been plugged in. Can you hand me an IP address? And with that, it usually hands more information. It usually hands your default gateway. It hands Subnet mask. It can hand you DNS information. It can hand you a bunch of things. But the most important part is to understand what an IP address is, and that's why we're kind of getting along with that. So the DHCP server is going to hand, hey, I need an IP, and the DHCP server is going to say, I got one for you. Or it might not. So the DHCP server has a pool of IP addresses that it hands out. And the reason that pool exists is that you get to control how people connect and the way they connect and how long they can stay connected. This is something that I struggle with seeing people misconfigure all the time. There are default, what's called a lease. This is a lease for an IP address. And so when this computer asked to have an IP address, the DHCP server said, okay, I've got an IP address for you. It's 192.168.1.103. And here is your subnet mask. It's 255.255.255.255.0. And here is your default gateway, 192.168.1.1. And that is the internet when you leave, or at least it's not the street that you live on. You could still not get to the highway by turning off the street that you live on. Maybe you need to turn off 4 or 5 streets. And so you have 4 or 5 different default gateways. The best way to describe a default gateway is effectively you walk out of your house and say, hey, I'm looking to go to a Wendy's. Wendy's is a burger chain here in America. And there's a guy on the street, and he says, I don't know how to get to Wendy's, but I know you got to take a right at that stop sign. Okay, cool. So I go take a right at the stop sign. I'm on another street, and I say, hey, I need to get to Wendy's. And there's a guy there that says, hey, Wendy's isn't here, but I know you got to take a left up there, right? All the default gateway is saying that traffic that you want is not local. It's not here on my network. Therefore, you must go into the out world, into the zone of the unknown, which is the default gateway for all traffic. That continues down the path until you eventually reach a default gateway. It's not an exact example, but I'm going to show you a command called traceroute. Traceroute is effectively a hopping tool, traceRT, and we're going to go to Google. And traceRT is pinging. We'll talk about a ping here in a second. And that ping will hop and hop and hop and hop, and it's poking all of the hops between where I'm at and google.com. Now, this is going to take a few minutes, but effectively it's going to keep pinging down the list until it gets to it. These are hops or routers or firewalls in the way that are directing the traffic. They just don't have an IP address or a name, or they're not providing me with information. There are other programs that will provide you more information. This is just to kind of give you an idea of the traffic between you and Google and where that's going. So when this finishes, we can have a little bit of a bigger conversation. Typically, I'm on Google Fiber, so I'm pinging Google. It should be a pretty quick connection. And you can see some information here. So I've like this is DFW, that's Dallas Fort Worth. So you're seeing that's probably production 02AE. That probably stands something. These are all the IP addresses of the Google backbone, some of their backbone infrastructure. These might be pingable. These might be not pingable. We'll talk about what a ping is in just a few moments as we go, because that's one of the things you're going to typically do as an IT professional is ping IP addresses a lot. The typical response and hops for any website on the internet is probably about 20 to 30 overall. And one of the reasons why it was called the World Wide Web is that the interconnectivity of it looked like a spider web. So you have effectively, when we're talking about how you're taking your traffic and you're leaving a street, you're leaving that street of the spider web and going to another piece of the spider web and going down that route. There's lots of different ways to get to websites and IP addresses after you get out on the major internet itself. Some of the outages have short windows because there's failover technology and there's other websites involved. And for example, with Amazon, you could have a east server and a west server, and you could have them synchronized between each other. And you can have technology that detects that one has gone down and diverts all of the customers to the other. But normally, you would be routed to the one that's closest to you based on the IP address that you're coming from so that you have the best experience. This is why when you interact with gaming servers or other internet server technologies, they're wanting you to be on a server near you so that you get the best experience, because being closer to it physically matters. All right, so the trace is complete. Here we are, and this trace route tells us that it's between the opening of my internet to the network and to the end point of Google itself, google.com. It's 23 hops. And each one of these is effectively saying, hey, I'm looking for google.com, and my network knows that it's not here locally. And it knows it's not on the street. And so it says, hey, I got to go out this IP, this address. Then it goes on this street and says, hey, I'm looking for google.com. Where do I go? And then there's a piece of networking equipment here that says, it's not on this street either. You got to go out this address. So out that address I go, and this continues down. Now these are blocked from me. I don't get to see these, at least in this command. Like I said, there's lots of other programs you can do this. But I keep asking. My traffic is asking, where do I go? Where do I go? Oh, you got to go here. You got to go here. You got to go here. You got to go, until it just now, just like if I was trying to travel across town, and I'm following Google Maps, I'm going to have lots of different turns I'm going to have to take to get to my destination, and maybe it's going to be 23 turns. This is the same concept. Now, in your network, you might have 20 computers that have no reason at all to ever talk to each other. So you don't care about what these local IP addresses are almost ever. In a business environment, though, you're going to, because you're probably going to have printers, you might have a server, you might have shared infrastructure, you might have a scanner, you might have something that people need to interact with, and knowing these things is going to be really critical to you in how to manage it. So you're going to ping stuff. So let's ping 192.1. Oh, ping 192.168.1.1. That's my default gateway. And it's saying, hey, I can't find that. Oh, because I've added an extra dot. So I ping it by default in Windows World 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. I sent out 4 packets and I got 4 responses. Effectively, this was, hey, are you there? Yes, I am there. Hey, are you there? Yes, I am there. Hey, are you there? Yes, I am there. Hey, are you there? Yes, I'm there. This is all what this should look like. If this was on Wi-Fi, it would be a different situation. I would have a slower millisecond time. This is MS, that stands for milliseconds. And you start to have a slower millisecond time the further you get away from people. So you can see here I'm pinging google.com, right? I'm pinging this address, and my response time is 8 milliseconds. Well, because I'm on fiber. If I was on coax or a slower internet connection, I could see these being really bad. Starlink, those are going to be in the hundreds, and if you had real SATCOM, you could see over 1,000 millisecond ping time. So you could really have a performance problem. But if I want this to go on forever, I can just type -T, or I can give it a literal value of a number if I wanted something in specific. You're going to learn that there's going to be 900 different ways that you can get help. In the case of ping, it's ping-help. There's going to be programs that you're going to see in the future in the command prompt. It's going to be ping ? or ping /? or ping --help or ping just help, or just typing ping by itself also gives you effectively the help list. This is one of many things that has not really been fully standardized in the industry, is getting help. It's just not still properly done. The developers that write the program effectively get to determine what the help command is, and then it's too late. It's out in the wild. So, but you can see in here, here's all the commands for ping, and if we wanted specifically to have a count, we can use a -N for number, and -count, and it will send just that amount. So let's do -ping google.com -N 2 pinging Google. Oh, it's very important that you ping the right thing that you're looking for. 1, 2, and I'm done pinging. I only pinged 2. Great. So pinging is going to be a command you use a lot. It's important to know that ping is a type of traffic that can be blocked, and machines may have ping blocked by default. There's websites that have ping blocked by default as well, because ping traffic is a type of traffic, and in the original days of the internet, it was kind of an attack. You can still kind of do a ping flood if you wanted to. It's not nearly as effective as internet gets crazier and crazier. They're sending other kinds of attacks. They're typically not doing ping floods, but it can still be a thing. Anyway, back to IP addresses. So you have an IP address. The scope tells you how many are in it, and how many are in it are based on the pool. And one of the things that you're going to need to know as an IT professional is how to determine the pool. Well, I can tell you that the pool, because this is a computer on an isolated network and there's not going to be a lot here, the pool is very small. And if I'm at 103, that means the DHCP scope probably starts at 100. It's a good rough assumption. That means that the DHCP scope is probably 192.168.1.1. 1.1.100 to 200. And then the pool probably has 100 IPs. And then the lease, a default lease, is different networking equipment and different networking standards. But the typical default lease is about 8 hours. Right? That means that a lease and an IP address is effectively like a ticket. You're going to a bar, and they have, in this case, 100 tickets. And that means 100 customers can come in, and they get a ticket, and the ticket lasts for 8 hours. That means if you were configuring a Wi-Fi network for a bar or a restaurant or someone that is not a business, that is not a standard business, you need to make sure that the lease for the IP addresses is way shorter than 8 hours, because effectively you could have 100 customers come in 2 hours. They all connect their phones to the Wi-Fi or their laptops, or they're working, they're buying a coffee, they buy a beer, they get lunch or breakfast, and they leave, but they take the ticket with them because the ticket's good for 8 hours. If you have, within 3 hours, more than 100 people come into your restaurant or your shop or whatever it is, and they gobble up all the IP addresses, for the next 4 or 5 hours, at the end of the day, people are going to be complaining they can't connect to your Wi-Fi. Well, how do you fix that? Well, you can reset the Wi-Fi. You would literally just reboot the router. That would solve the problem, because that would reset all the tickets, but it wouldn't change the actual problem, where you could set this so that it was set lease to 1 hour. And then every hour, the entire pool would refresh, or at least it would be a maximum of that time frame that someone would hold that ticket for an hour, and then they would re-request the ticket. Actually, the re-request happens in the middle of that time frame. A 1 hour lease ticket would re-request it at about 30 minutes and say, hey, right, why do I not want to make this lease time very short? Because I can set it up to be minutes. It's because traffic, lease traffic, lease time can get pretty noisy, and you don't want to have unnecessary noise on your network. So you want to make sure that you've got your DHCP pool and your scope configured properly. But IP addresses are really straightforward. It can be almost any number followed by between 0 and 255. You're typically going to see a lot of this 192.168. You'll see some 10 dots. You might see a 172 dot or a couple. If you see 127 anything, this is a loopback address. This is not real. It doesn't matter whether... A lot of people like to use 127.0.0.1, but any 127 address is a loopback, and it's effectively testing the stack of the network connection. So if I ping 127.8.9.5, it connects, but that's me connecting to myself. That's not anything in particular, but this is what most people choose to use as a loop. They're all loopbacks. There's certain ranges. They don't really apply anymore, but if you were going to take certification tests, you're going to need to know what a Class A, a Class B, a Class C is. You're going to need to know subnetting. You're going to need to know a bunch of things. Really, the most important things are, what's an IP address? What's my IP address? What's the IP address of my default gateway? What's the IP address of servers? What's the IP address of printers on my network? And there's tools that you can then use to scan those networks and to look for those things. And we'll get into that in the next video.